Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to, I was gonna say Thursday, but it's not Thursday, it's Tuesday. I'm gonna say hello to some people who are here. So Michelle is here, good morning Michelle. Irene is here, good morning. Basil's here, good morning. Hadil is here, good morning Hadil. Yeah, okay, let's jump in here. So, here we are, kind of, where are we now? We're kind of headed into the mid to latter part of the Roman Republic. And so we said Rome, of course, started out as a monarchy. It threw out the Etruscan kings, created a republic that over the centuries they kind of continued to elaborate on and sort of clarify, right? But most of yesterday, I guess we were talking about conquest and warfare, right? And so we said that the Romans threw out the Etruscans, kind of had to fight a war with them for about 100 years to permanently keep them out of Rome. And then they kind of went ahead and conquered the rest of Italy. And then they just sort of kept going. And we said yesterday that, or we saw in the video yesterday that the Romans had a bit of they were a little bit nervous about their neighbors, right? They were always worried about being attacked, or at least they claimed that they were. And so they kind of continually attacked the people next to them in order to ensure that they themselves wouldn't be attacked. But of course, that led to greater and greater territory, right? Taking over more and more neighbors. We said that they fought with the Macedonians, not the Macedonians. The Macedonians. And they also had 3 wars with Carthage, right? And so Carthage, we said, was on the north shore of Africa there, which it's modern day Tunisia. So if you're curious about Carthage and you want to go see Carthaginian ruins, you should go to Tunisia and you can check it out if you're interested. But the Romans fought 3 wars with the Carthaginians, right? A first one in which the Romans decisively won and humiliated the Carthaginians. The second one where that General Hannibal almost unbelievably marches over the European Alps with 40,000 men and elephants and horses and all kinds of crazy things. Of course, the elephants don't quite make it. And he's kind of waging war against Rome for years and years, right? But he can't take the city because he doesn't have any equipment to sort of breach the walls of Rome. And Rome continually is able to recruit new soldiers to fight him off, right? Until that great general, Publius Cornelius Scipio decides, well, we're gonna take the fight to them, right? And so instead of continuing to fight Hannibal around the walls of Rome, Scipio and his army sail off and start attacking Carthage, right? So Hannibal has to come home. They fight it out. The Romans win again. They drive Hannibal into exile, and then years later they just kind of go back and flatten the entire city just for good measure, right? So again, lots of war and conflict with the Macedonians, with the Carthaginians, and basically with all kinds of other people that they will come into contact with as well. So again, this map is a little bit later in Roman history, but their territory will be growing, right? From northern Italy into sort of eastern Greece and Macedonia, all the way into Spain, around the sort of northern part of the Mediterranean, or the northwestern part of the northwestern part of Africa, the southwestern part of the Mediterranean. Roman influence is growing, right? And we watched the video yesterday, and what we said was, one of the things that's starting to happen here is that the Roman Republic is getting really big, right? The governmental system that the Romans created was created to simply run a city-state, right? It was basically created to run Rome and the areas around it. But now Rome has this huge, almost empire under its control. And how are you going to are you going to run this empire? How are you going to deal with all of this land and money and people and security concerns? And so one of the things the Romans do is that they divide their territories into provinces. And those provinces are governed by governors, right? So the Senate is the one to appoint governors, and so they say, Nicholas, you're now the you're now the governor of Hispaniola. We're sending you to Spain for 5 years. Try to keep a lid on the place. Make sure they keep paying their taxes. Don't let the barbarians attack. See you in 5 years, right? So that's kind of what most governors are kind of sent out there to do. These governorships are actually quite attractive because often the provinces are kind of at the edge of the empire, and so there's an opportunity for military glory, right? You can fight with the barbarians and gain military glory and prestige. If you take over some more land while you're out there, you get to keep the land that you take over. You get to keep their stuff so you can get rich. And of course, you're almost operating like a king in your own province, right? The Roman, the Roman Senate won't interfere too much in what you do there. You're pretty much the sole authority in that Roman province. And so it's an attractive position for many reasons. And so lots of prominent Romans are trying to get appointed as governors. But again, there's only so many provinces and there's only so many governorships to go around, right? And so what's kind of happening here is a lot of things are accelerating and almost spiraling out of control, right? So Rome is growing bigger and bigger and bigger every year. They're getting richer and richer every year. And as a result, some Roman men are really going to any length to achieve power and glory and status. And we started to see that a little bit yesterday when we heard about Gaius Marius and when we heard about Lucius Cornelius Sulla, right? I'm going to come back to this in a minute. So we said that Roman political life had kind of a structure to it, right? There were ways to sort of become or to gain public office here, whether you were a quaestor or a praetor or a consul or whatever you were. There was kind of a ladder that you had to climb, and you had to get elected to all these positions, and you had to serve in the military and be a certain age, and it was a pretty competitive environment. And so really to be elected to any of these offices was a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big accomplishment. And of course, if you were elected as consul, huge, right? Huge honor. It's like saying an ancestor of yours was president of the United States, if you care about such a thing, right? That's a big, prestigious position, right? And so lots of men sort of attempted to succeed in politics. Not many do because there's not that many positions available. But as the money starts flowing in, attempts to sort of gain these offices become more and more competitive. And Gaius Marius will have something to do with this as well, but we'll talk about that a little bit later today. We read this yesterday, and we said that one of the Gracchi, Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus, he proposed a land distribution law, right? Because all of this new land that the Roman Empire was taking over, it was really winding up in the hands of the people who were already rich, right? And there was tons and tons of poor people in Rome. And so Tiberius Gracchus here says, hey, why don't we create some sort of system where when we conquer new territory, we can set aside a certain amount for people who don't have land, right? That way we can take over more land, but we can also give it to the people who don't have any. Maybe that'll be good for Rome, right? But of course, the rich are not for that, right? Because rich people generally like to become richer. I think actually I don't think that has anything to do with rich people. I think everyone wants to become richer, right? How much money is enough? Just a little bit more than what I have, right? Or maybe there's just never enough. I don't know. But clearly the rich and the powerful of Rome are not in favor. We read that Tiberius here gets this passed by the plebeian council, but when he comes before the senators are upset, right? They think he's trying to make himself a king by bypassing the Senate and using the will of the people to take things away from the rich. And so, yeah, they beat him to death on the floor of the Senate, which should be understood as insane, right? Again, think about Nancy Pelosi clubbing Mitch McConnell to death with a chair leg or something on the floor of the Senate, right? Insane. But again, these things are starting to happen in Rome. We read about his younger brother, Gaius Gracchus. Gaius has the same idea, but he says we should also grant Roman citizenship to our Italian allies, so the people who kind of live in Italy but are outside of Rome itself. Again, we see that idea is not well met by the Roman elite, and so the consul asks the Senate to approve a final decree of the Senate, right, which allows the consul to do whatever he has to safeguard the Republic, which Gaius Gracchus knows means that he's going to be executed, and so he commits suicide, right? But again, we said it shows that there was kind of a widening gap between the rich and the poor in Rome, and that problem was not going to go away, right? Nor was the problem of people living outside of Rome wanting to be Roman citizens. And as you read, they have a social war a little bit later, and the allies wind up getting citizenship as a result. We heard a little bit about Gaius Marius, right? And Gaius Marius is a successful general, very prestigious, but we see some irregularities happening, right? He's elected to, was it 6 or 7 consulships? Is it 7? 7? Either way, you're only supposed to have one, right? You're supposed to get elected to one, you serve as consul for the year, and then you have to wait 10 more years if you want to try to get elected again, which very few people do. But here, for some reason, the rules are being flouted, right? They're being disregarded, they're being thrown out. And so Marius here is able to be consul for 7 straight years. In the process, he makes some important reforms for the military, because he is a soldier. He abolishes the property requirement for military service. So in the past, if you wanted to serve in the Roman military, you needed to own land, you needed to own property. That was the prerequisite for entering the military. Gaius Marius says, nope, doesn't matter anymore. If you want to join the military, you can join it. He commits to arming the Roman soldiers and paying them for their service, right? So again, warfare now becomes kind of an arm of, or the army becomes a part of the state. And they mentioned that in the video yesterday. And I said in the ancient world, usually, there is no standing army. If your city or city-state is under attack and you're a farmer or whatever the heck you are, you pick up your sword and shield and you go to defend the city-state, right? But here, Gaius Marius says, no, we don't need to do that anymore. We're going to have full-time professional soldiers, people whose only job is to defend Rome, or more accurately, to attack people who Rome wants to attack. But either way, yeah. Did he? No. He's as consul, he's able to do this. So he's one of the consuls of the Roman Republic, and he is able to kind of remake the army, right, to make it more powerful, more efficient, more organized. And he does just that, right? He does kind of remake the military. And in some ways, in a very successful way, right? this is the tricky part, and this is where, in some ways, things go wrong. He makes generals responsible for providing land to their troops when they retire. Okay, so the idea here is that now you can be a professional soldier for life. That can be your job, right? It's not just something you do when your city-state is under threat. You can be a soldier from when you're 18 all the way to your retirement. And then, if you do a good job, your general will say, you know, Baja, now you're retired. You fought for me bravely for so long. Here's a piece of land for you. You can go off and farm and be with your family and retire, right? So your retirement package, your pension, if you will, doesn't come from the Roman state. It comes from your general. Your general is responsible for getting that for you and giving it to you. Do you foresee a problem with that? What's the problem? Right. So there's certainly a motivation for generals to conquer more land, right? Because they want to give it to their soldiers. But what's the other problem? Yeah, if they screw them over, maybe, but they don't. They don't.
So, as you said, that if a soldier works well, is it a line if the soldier needs work or dying of battle, will the family members get along?
I don't know about that. I don't know if the family would get anything. Maybe. I'm not sure about that. It's a good thought, but I'm not entirely sure. Yeah. You never want a military that is not loyal to the state, right? The military has to serve the interests of the state, and we almost saw that a little bit a few months ago with Donald Trump, right? Where he was, Donald Trump was talking about my generals and this and that, and some of the U.S. Army generals said, the U.S. Army serves the Constitution of the United States, right? Not the president. And so that's what you want. You want the Army to uphold the Constitution of the state, not listen to the commands of just one guy. If you know your World War II history, you'll know that prior to World War II, Adolf Hitler had the German army swearing allegiance to him, to the Führer, right? So they weren't following the orders of the German state or the German Constitution. They were following the orders of the Führer. You don't want that, right? If you're gonna run a country one day, you actually might want that, because then you can do whatever you want. But in a normal functioning state, you do not want that. But here, that's exactly what happens, right? These soldiers are more loyal to their generals than they are to Rome, because where's their pension going to come from? Where's the retirement coming from? The general, right? So when the general says, we march on Rome, yes, sir, we march on Rome. Right? You don't want that. And that's how guys like Lucius Cornelius Sulla are able to get their army and march on the city they're supposed to defend, right? Because they are loyal to him, right? These soldiers become intensely loyal to their generals, not to Rome, right? So again, I don't think that's what Gaius Marius had in mind. I suspect he didn't plan for that to happen, but sometimes there's unexpected consequences. So here he is. Here's Gaius Marius. Again, important Roman general, 7-time consul, which is pretty prestigious, I guess, even though you're breaking the rules, Marius. And again, he kind of comes into conflict with this guy, Lucius Cornelius Sulla. And again, Sulla is also a consul. He's a prominent military general as well. But he wants to go to war against this Mithridates guy. And Mithridates is kind of in Asia Minor. He's where like modern day Turkey is now. But Sulla wants to go and wage war against him because Mithridates is super wealthy, right? So if Sulla is able to conquer, to get rid of Mithridates and execute him, he gets to keep all of his riches, right? So this is a big payday for Sulla if he can conquer Mithridates. But yeah, so the Senate appoints him, and then Marius overturns it because Marius wants the command for himself because, again, payday, right? But then Sulla comes back, right? He comes back with his super loyal army, marches into Rome, basically puts a sword to the throat of the Senate and says, "This command is mine," right? They nod. And then he goes off and fights Mithridates, right? And wins. Yeah. Yes.
So he was against Marius?
Yeah, they were, so Marius was kind of the older, more senior guy. Yeah, and Sulla was kind of the younger guy. And so the Senate knew they had to send a general to deal with this Mithridates guy who was causing problems in their province. They thought Marius was a little too old, so they decided to send Sulla. Marius didn't like that, so he tried to overturn that. Yeah, he tried to overturn it, and then he ran Sulla out of Rome. But then Sulla came back with his army and took his command and went to Asia Minor. Yes, he is a person. Yeah, so for the first time we see a Roman army marching on Rome. And again, imagine Donald Trump coming into the Senate chamber in the United States with the United States Marines behind him, right? This is total insanity and not the way a democratic republic is supposed to operate. But again, the stakes are high. These guys are powerful. They have money, lots of money. And now they have armies that will do whatever they say, right? Because those armies are loyal to the generals. They're not loyal to Rome anymore. Yeah, so Sulla goes off to Asia Minor. He defeats Mithridates, gets even more rich than he was before, comes back to Rome, and again does the same thing, right? He marches in with his army. He has himself appointed as dictator for 3 years, which is all kinds of wrong. Number one, you're only supposed to have a dictator in times of emergency, although this is an emergency, but he created the emergency. You're only supposed to have a dictator if there's an emergency, if there's a threat to Rome, and it's only supposed to be for 6 months, right? That was the whole Cincinnatus thing, right? Cincinnatus was elected dictator for 6 months. He fought off the barbarians or whoever, and then he graciously gives up his power, right? And here you see Sulla having himself appointed dictator for 3 years when there's arguably no emergency or threat to be found, except maybe him. He rounds up his political enemies and executes them, right? He establishes these proscriptions, right? A list of enemies of the state who are not enemies of the state, they're enemies of Sulla. But he has them rounded up and executed or jailed. They mentioned in the video yesterday that Julius Caesar is going to be part of this as well, because he's so I forget what the relation is. I think like Julius Caesar's aunt is married to Marius's brother or something. So Caesar is connected to Marius in a way, and he's on Sulla's list, and so Caesar gets rounded up. What's that?
I think it was the Gaius himself. I read that.
Was it Gaius himself? Okay. So so Caesar's aunt is married to Marius himself. Julius Caesar gets rounded up as part of this, and Sulla decides not to kill him, but he takes all of his stuff. So Caesar is basically stripped of any wealth that he had, but he's alive. To be continued. He'll come back later, obviously. And then Sulla retires very suddenly from politics. And I think he went to an oracle, and the oracle told him something that, like, he was going to die in office or something like that. And he was worried that, oh God, I better get out of office. And so he retired and went off to the countryside, hopefully to live a long life, which he did not. But he retired very quickly because he got some bad advice from the oracle, or advice from the oracle that suggested he should retire. But the damage here has been done, right? Sulla has already spit all over the Roman constitution. He has broken all the rules. Marius broke rules too. But Sulla marched in with his armies twice, took over Rome, acted as dictator, rounded up his enemies and executed them. Brutal stuff, right? And crazy stuff. But again, the problem is that once these abuses of power start happening, they continue to happen, right? And so Sulla takes up a lot of power, and then when he immediately retires, there's a bit of a power vacuum, right? There's a place where he used to be that he's not. And so other generals try to sort of get in there and sort of gain some power for themselves. And one of them here is Pompey, okay? So his name is Gaius Pompey. He's yet another talented Roman general, quite young, in fact. And he's one of Sulla's soldiers. But he's going to do kind of the same things as Sulla, right? He's going to follow Sulla's model. Right. So we'll get to Pompey in a second here, but we're kind of transitioning into this late Republic period. And again, in the Republic is starting to come apart. Okay, it's too big. Its government system is not organized to kind of control this amount of people in this area of land. Keep in mind the Romans are really traditional, right? They don't like, they like technological innovation, especially where it has to do with warfare, but they're kind of a traditionally minded people. And so the Republic works in a particular way, and they don't really want to change it, right? They don't really want to reform. They're kind of conservative. But again, there's lots of generals who will just say, well, I'm just going to do what I want. And in fact, it's Pompey, the general, who says, what's his quote? He says, don't quote the laws to me. We're the ones with the swords. Right? So you can pretty clearly tell what his approach to the Republic is, right? What's that? Yeah, he's like, I'm going to do what I want because I can. But yeah, things are kind of breaking down, and Rome is kind of forgetting about the sort of values and morals that, supposedly it was built on. So the Romans grew up with an idea of service and sacrifice for Rome, right? Rome came before everything else, right? Before the gods, before the family, before yourself, right? But here we see these late Republic Roman generals are just in it for the power and the prestige, right? They're not interested in doing things for Rome or the community. They're just trying to get as much money and power as they possibly can, right? Again, I told you about the patron-client system in Rome, where everybody was a patron of somebody and everybody was a client of someone else. And that kind of tied everybody together in a web of sort of cooperation and sort of expectations and obligations, right? You had obligations to the people above you, right? The men to whom you were a client. But also, if you were a patron, you had responsibilities to your clients, right? To help them out, to give them loans. If they were accused of a crime, to help pay for a lawyer for them. everybody was kind of tied together in this sort of cooperative, hierarchical system, right? But now it's kind of evolved or devolved into situations where everyone's patron is their general, and the general has a bunch of clients, which are his soldiers, right? And they're kind of, these personal armies are kind of in it for their own gain, right? Whatever sort of riches and money they can get their hands on, right? And as we've seen, these generals are willing to do anything to get what they want, right? And so Sulla does this by marching on Rome not once but twice, and Pompey will do it as well. He'll use his army, his own personal army, to win glory, and he'll manage to make himself consul, even though he has no other political experience, and he hasn't even been has he been a soldier for 10 years? Maybe. He's a pretty successful general at that point, but he hasn't held any other offices, and he's not old enough to be consul. But because he's got the swords, he makes himself consul and does the same thing as Sulla, right? Which is basically whatever he wants to do. The other thing that I might mention here toward the late Republic is that, again, there's a big gap between rich and poor. So there's guys like Pompey and Sulla and later Caesar running around. These guys have their own armies. They're super rich. They've got lots of land, lots of power. But most Romans are very significantly poor, to the point where at this point Rome is basically filled with poor homeless people. And the state, the Roman state, is basically feeding them grain just to kind of keep them alive. And so huge amounts of grain are being imported from Egypt and from all around the Mediterranean just to feed these poor Romans who have no land and no job. And they're just kind of hanging around Rome. But, if you don't feed them, they're going to riot. And so the state continues to feed these people, even though, there's no place for them, right? There's no land, there's no jobs, there's no money. And again, Roman politics become increasingly wild and violent and dysfunctional, right? The old republic system is breaking down. People are ignoring the laws or bending them or breaking them or doing backroom deals, and the whole thing is kind of becoming a bit of a sham, right? It's becoming a bit of a bad joke, if you will. And that is where our friend Julius Caesar comes in. Who had heard of Julius Caesar before this moment? Yeah, super popular, right? He's probably the most popular Roman ever to exist. I'm sure not many of you had heard of Pompey or Sulla before, but Caesar has kind of been immortalized, right? Anyone seen the Shakespeare play, Julius Caesar? Or read it? No? Caesar's an interesting character because he's around right at this time, right at the time when the Republic is at its most crazy, right? So there's all sorts of client armies running around, loyal to their generals, attacking Rome, enriching themselves. There's money pouring into Rome, although it's all pouring into the pockets of the richest Romans, right? The poor are not getting any of that, really. And so it's kind of a crazy, unhinged sort of time, and Caesar's kind of a part of that, and he's also a product of it. He starts off, as you can see, his career as a lawyer, right? And from all accounts, Caesar is an excellent lawyer. He is very good in front of a crowd. He's very persuasive, very eloquent, and he makes a good lawyer. He's a talented lawyer when he starts out. but he tries to make himself, he's very good also at making a name for himself with the people, right? So if you're being tried in a Roman court, you're being tried out in the open, in the forum. And so if Ivan is accused of, I don't know, Ivan, would you commit a crime? No? If Ivan, okay, well, maybe you didn't, but you're accused of one. If Ivan is accused of murder, then his trial is going to be out in the open, in the forum, in front of anyone who wants to walk by, right? So anyone can watch Ivan's trial. But it's also a bit of a showcase for Ivan's lawyer, who just happens to be Julius Caesar, because Caesar knows that, yes, he's going to try and get Ivan acquitted for the crime, but he's also going to get to make a name for himself in public. People will see him, and if he's a good speaker and a good performer, people will watch and pay attention and know who Julius Caesar actually is. He does the same thing when he becomes, I think he gets elected as a oh boy, I think he gets elected as a quaestor, I think. And so part of his responsibilities in that office is to put on gladiator games. And so Caesar borrows all kinds of money and puts on the greatest gladiator games that anyone's ever seen, right? Very lavish, free food, free booze, lots of gladiators fighting to the death, very gory and awful, but the Romans love it anyway. And so again, Caesar makes a name for himself because he's kind of putting himself in front of the public, right? He's making sure people know who he is. He then gets himself elected to that position of Pontifex Maximus. So again, it's not a big deal in terms of, it doesn't have a lot of power, but it has a lot of visibility, right? When you have to do the rituals to, ensure that Rome remains safe and prosperous, who does the ritual? Julius Caesar, right? So Julius is going to be very prominent in the minds of Romans, right? He's going to be hard to ignore as a eloquent, convincing lawyer, as someone who's putting on these lavish gladiator games that all the poor people get to go to for free and they love. And then he's Pontifex Maximus. He's doing all these rituals in front of the whole city. So he's kind of getting his name out there, right? He's very visible, right? Oops. Very visible. And then I've got some more to show you. Okay, so let me just look here. They're not, but Gaius is a popular Roman name, and there's not that many. Again, the Romans are pretty traditional. There's not that many Roman names out there, so Gaius isn't the only one, but it's a popular one, and there's lots of There's lots of Gaiuses out there, for sure. Yeah, because we have Gaius Marius, Gaius Gracchus, Gaius Julius Caesar. Yeah, we have a lot. Whoops. 10 to 34, 25. Okay. So I've got a little more video to show you. For online people in the live chat, I put the section of the video that we want to watch. It's 21 minutes, 10 seconds to 34 minutes and 25 seconds. So I guess we've got about 13 minutes or so to watch. So the video is in Microsoft Teams. And so just watch that section of the video, then take a break, then come back and we'll talk about what we see, okay? So I'll turn you loose to do that, and then we'll take the break, and then we'll come back, okay? Okay, so we're back. The the video does not do a great job of describing the events that lead up to this because there's kind of a lot going on behind the scenes that you kind of need to understand why Caesar is such a big deal, what was so important in the video, and so you need a little bit of background. So I'm going to suggest that we read this section of the textbook, and just so we understand that in a little more detail, because this is actually what's going to bring about the end of the Republic. And part of the reason why Caesar is such a big deal, and part of the reason why we kind of all know his name already, is that he's kind of there right at the end of the Roman Republic, and so he's kind of a focal point for everything that happens. And he's not 100% to blame. He's a product of the times, but he's still right there at the end of the Republic and the beginning of the Empire. So it's worth paying attention to what happens in connection with that, and how we get from kind of one place to another. But anyway, I'll ask you to read just these few pages of the textbook talking about this first triumvirate. What is it, and how does it start, and how does it end? What happened at the end of Caesar's command in Gaul, which you probably know a little bit already. How does he defeat Pompey? How does Caesar rule in Rome from 47 to 44 BCE? And then what brings Caesar's rule to an end, which you probably kind of already know anyway, but I'll let you read this section. We'll come back in about 10 minutes or so, talk about the answers to these questions, and then we can sort of understand the significance of Caesar a little more. So, yeah.
So like when we say 47 44 BCE, how many years?
How many years? 3.
Okay, so it's only 1 year.
So it's only what?
So it's like 1 BCE is 1 year.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's read. I'll put 10 minutes on the clock here, and then we'll come back and talk about these things. Okay, people. Let's talk a little bit about these. So there's, I don't know, there's a certain amount of detail in this section, but I think it's still worth knowing and exploring. Who's in this triumvirate? Who's in this little alliance of three? Pompey, Caesar. Yeah, good old what's his name? Crassus, yeah. So three kind of very prominent, very powerful men in Rome team up, and they're going to help each other out with the things that they need, right? Whether they need land and sort of Senate approval for land for their generals, whether they're trying to win a consulship, whether they want a military command, whether they want tax breaks and they need the other one to pass them. They're all going to, like, I'll scratch my back and, or I'll scratch your back and you scratch mine, right? Everyone's going to help each other out. And so, yeah, it's kind of a bit of a backroom deal between these three guys, right? They're going to help each other out in exchange for the other's help, right? And so, yes. What were you going to say?
No, I'll back to the question.
Okay. I don't know.
Question two.
I was going to say, I don't remember asking a question, but I was going to see what the answer was and then, figure it out. Okay, how does it end?
After Pompey's wife, which is Caesar's daughter, died by child first,
Yeah.
and her daughter also died, and Croesus died in a battle. They ended
Yeah. What's that?
They died.
Yeah, there was a lot of death, right? So, yeah, Julius Caesar's daughter is married to Pompey. What's that? Daughter is married to Pompey. The daughter Julia dies in childbirth, as does the child, which is quite sad. And apparently, actually, even though it was kind of a political marriage, Caesar married his daughter to Pompey for a political reason. Actually, from what I'm told or from what I know, Pompey actually loved her and they had like a really good relationship. So it's kind of sad that she died, even though it was a political marriage, but it was a good one apparently. So she dies sadly. Crassus dies when he's out fighting a battle against the Parthians, and so really there's nothing to connect Pompey and Caesar together, right? And meanwhile, Pompey is at home, in the Senate, kind of, sort of running Rome that way. And Caesar at the time is out in Gaul, right? And Gaul is kind of what we now know as sort of kind of France and Germany and sort of the part of Europe that's just north of Italy. That's kind of what Gaul was at the time. And so according to the Romans, Gaul was full of barbarians, which they weren't, but the Romans thought they were. And as you saw, or as you read, Caesar gets himself appointed as the governor of those three provinces up at the top of Italy, right? So Illyricum, Cisalpine Gaul, and Transalpine Gaul. And so he's the governor of all those three territories, and he goes up there, he finds an excuse to start fighting with the Gauls, which he does, and then he proceeds to sort of go to war with them for 10 long years, right? Killing probably 1 million Gauls in the process, taking over large parts of what's now France and Germany and probably a few other places. Takes those over, and then at the end of the 10 years, Pompey says, okay, Caesar, it's time for you to come home. Your commission is over, your governorship is up, time for you to come back to Rome. And they kind of hint at this a little bit in the video, but Caesar's in a bit of a tricky spot, right? Because he's been away from home for a long time. He's been gone for 10 years. Crassus, who used to have his back, is dead. Pompey, who used to have his back, is now his sworn enemy. And the other thing they don't mention is that Caesar's actually in a lot of debt. And so remember, he borrowed all that money to put on those lavish gladiator games. He still owes those people. And so Caesar's worried that if he comes back to Rome, then in setting foot in the city, he will lose his kind of general powers. He's not a consul. He's not anyone. He's just a normal citizen. And so he's worried that he's going to be hauled off to court to pay for his debts, which he hasn't paid. And he's also very worried that Pompey's supporters will murder him, right? Because again, there's a lot of political violence in Rome at this time, and Pompey is no friend of Caesar anymore. Even though they were once in an alliance, not so much. And so, yeah, Caesar is legitimately worried. And so what can he do? Well, he can never return to Rome, I guess, but that doesn't seem like a good option for him. He can come back and try not to be killed, but that seems a little dangerous as well. Or he can simply take his army and march on Rome, which again is exactly what he does, right? Again, so just like Sulla did before, just like Pompey used his army for his own purposes, again, Caesar does the same thing, right? And so it doesn't quite talk about it in the video, but as you read in the text, it's actually a long series of battles, right? They're fighting all the way through the Mediterranean in kind of Greece, and then Pompey flees to Egypt, and Caesar chases him to Egypt, only to have Pompey assassinated by one of the Ptolemies, right? Because the Ptolemies took over Egypt earlier after Alexander the Great died, and so finally Caesar defeats Pompey, and there's kind of no one left, right? He's the most powerful person in Rome with a massive loyal army behind him. How's he ruling Rome during these 3 years when he's back? So he finally gets back to Rome after 4 years of trying to kill Pompey. What's his approach?
He would normally at first.
What's that?
He would normally at first like being a consul and stuff, and then at the end he became a dictator.
Right. So he was trying to figure out a way to stay in power, right? And so he's like, okay, well, maybe I can just keep getting myself elected as consul. That seems like a lot of work, but he can keep doing it, right? Even though, of course, it breaks the rules, but the rules are out the window at this point anyway. So he can try to keep getting elected as consul, or he can get himself appointed as a dictator, which he does. He gets himself appointed dictator perpetuo, right? In perpetuity, forever, right? Again, there's no such thing as this in the original Roman Republic. You get appointed as a dictator for 6 months, and then you lose your power, right? But here, he's going to get those dictator powers until he dies, and there's no emergency, right? There's no threat to Rome. He's just getting them because he wants them, I guess. So again, the whole, the original rules of the Republic are just, everybody's ignoring them, right? Nobody cares anymore. These guys are just doing whatever they want to do, and Caesar does whatever he wants to do. There's a very interesting thing that happens during this period. I will say that apparently, from what I know, once Caesar gets elected as dictator perpetuo for life, he's actually a pretty good leader. Like he runs Rome fairly well. Like he has good policies, and he tries to run the state quite well. And so even though he's broken all the rules and marched on Rome itself and killed or tried to kill Pompey, he's actually a pretty good administrator. So he got the Senate to appoint him dictator. Yeah. Again, when you've got 30 or 40,000 armed men behind you, you can can get a lot of things done, you know. So what was I going to say? Oh yeah, he's apparently a fairly good administrator, so he doesn't actually do a bad job once he's in power. But there's this very interesting situation that happens during a festival in Rome called the Lupercalia, I think. The Lupercalia? Yeah, Lupercalia. And so it's a festival that honors Remus and Romulus, the two founders of Rome. And he's standing there before the Romans on some sort of a pedestal or something in the forum. And his friend, Mark Antony, gets a crown of laurel leaves. And he takes it, and while Caesar's kind of standing there addressing the crowd, Mark Antony goes to put the crown over Caesar's head. And so everybody, of course, is wild and cheering, "Yay, Caesar, woo!" And then Mark Antony puts the crown over top of Caesar's head, and everybody goes quiet. And so, you know, Julius Caesar pushes the crown away, crowd goes wild. Everybody loves it. And again, you know, Caesar continues to speak, and Mark Antony goes to put the crown over his head again, and Caesar's like, crowd goes quiet again. Oh, push it away. And so he does this a few times, and then finally Mark Antony stops doing it. But it's very interesting, and it's not clear what's happening. It's not clear, but it looks like Mark Antony is trying to crown Caesar king, right? But you can tell by the crowd that the crowd is like, wait a minute, what's going on, right? We got rid of the kings 500 years ago, right? So there's still that distaste for kings. Like, right, I said, remember that word rex in Latin is like, ugh, right? Rex. And so it's not clear if this whole thing is like political theater, and Caesar is seeing if the crowd will accept him being crowned king, or if the whole point was for him to refuse the crown so that he could look, you know, very noble. And, you know, it's not clear what's going on. It's not clear what Caesar's trying to do. But either way, Mark Antony tries to crown Caesar, and Caesar pushes him away. And again, the crowd doesn't like the crown, right? They all quiet down. And then when he pushes it away, they go bonkers, right? So again, even though they like Caesar, they do not want to see another king, right? They still have that aversion to kings. But as you of course know, it's not going to end well for Caesar, right? He's going to rule for about 3 years, and then finally a group of senators who call themselves, I think they call themselves a few things. The Liberators comes to mind. But yeah, they murder Caesar on the floor of the Senate. And if you know the Caesar story at all, you'll know that, I think this comes from Shakespeare though, I don't know if it's a historical thing, but one of the people who murders him is a close friend of his. I think it's Marcus Junius Brutus. And remember, Brutus is the guy who helped kick out the Etruscan kings in the first place, right? Remember I said, pay attention to this guy's name, he's going to come back later. Well, the elder Brutus from 500 years ago, he helped throw out the Etruscan king. And so here, his descendant, Marcus Brutus, is like, oh my gosh, there's this guy trying to make himself king. And, you know, my ancestors fought to rid Rome of kings once and for all. And so Marcus Brutus, who was a friend of Caesar, actually winds up and literally stabs him in the back because he's worried that his friend is trying to make himself a king. And sort of, you know, Brutus's ancestry and the story of his family is the ones who protect Rome from the tyrant, right, from the king. And so, yeah, well, it's I don't know if it's in the blood, but it's in his family story, right? It's part of who Brutus is. And so again, Brutus is one of the conspirators. Brutus is one of the guys who stabbed Caesar, and so there's the famous line at the end that Caesar says, "Et tu, Brute, you too, Brutus." Again, it's not clear whether he actually said that, but yeah, he is stabbed on the floor of the Senate by about 60 senators. So super violent, super brutal. And then,
Maybe it was 40.
huh?
Maybe it was the 41st batch.
It's in 44 BC. He got stabbed a lot of times. It was like there's a lot of stabbing. I don't know the number, but the number is probably not accurate. But he got stabbed a lot apparently. And then the senators kind of run out of the Senate chamber and they say, "We have restored the Republic," which of course is ridiculous because the Republic has been damaged for quite some time. It's not, Caesar didn't wreck it. Caesar just happened to be there at the time. So these guys murder Caesar, but that doesn't restore the Republic. And instead of the people, celebrating, they either get very angry because they like Caesar, or they run to their homes and bar the doors because they know civil war is coming. And they're not wrong. Because again, when you get a powerful figure and then the powerful figure is gone, you have a vacuum, right? You have this space where the powerful figure used to be, and there are other powerful men who will try to put themselves into that space. And that's exactly what happens. Caesar is murdered, and almost no sooner does that happen than another civil war breaks out with other powerful men who want to sort of fill his shoes, sort of thing. Anyway, and that is the story of Caesar. We're kind of out of time. We'll come back to that tomorrow. There's a little more to talk about, but I'll end it there. I hope everyone has a good afternoon. I will see you tomorrow.